Hello, it's Pam here once again. Welcome back to the Identity Everything channel. So, Paul, what are you talking about on the show today?
Pam, I'm going to tell you what won't happen in 2024. That's right. A lot of people like to predict what will happen. But what I'm doing is telling you what won't happen. Guaranteed.
That sounds great, by the way. Did you get me a Christmas present?
I did, Pam. I bought you this beautiful Dior dress, which you can see right now. Hope you like it. Be nice to see it in something a bit different.
That sounds fabaroonie, Paul. I can't wait to try it on. Okay, so on with the show.
Passwords won't go away. Not exactly a rocket science sort of anti-prediction, but it's true. We can't get rid of passwords and we never will. And that's true for next year as it will be for 2025, 2026, 2029, and so on. Because we're wedded to them, people actually quite like them. There's a feeling of security, username and password. Even big enterprises like them because they can see they're all written down or they're put in a vault and they're rotated and everything. So they're not going anywhere. But we might see, what we will see is possibly a move towards more passwordless types of authentication, which might still use passwords or some kind of credentials in the background. But we are slowly moving towards user identity using biometrics and using other things other than passwords. But guarantee you, we'll still have the same conversations about passwords. You'll still hear about how can we get rid of passwords at loads and loads of conferences, and it's all very boring. But there you go. So passwords won't go away. What's next? Okay, this one's a bit controversial. CISOs won't get over themselves. Now here I go. I'm probably going to lose a few subscribers here when I say this, but CISOs really do need to get over themselves. I don't think you can spend a day on LinkedIn without a CISO, a Chief Information Security Officer, whinging about their job. They usually whinge about the fact that people want to sell them stuff. They might whinge about how difficult it is to manage all their responsibilities. And they also endlessly talk about talking to the board, of which they are a member. Now, CISOs are a great invention, and the word chief has replaced director for the old-fashioned when we used to have boards of directors and managing directors as bosses of companies before everything got Americanized and it became chief this, chief that. So now we have chief executive officer, we have chief financial officer, we have chief operations officer, we have chief chef officer, we have chief of tanks, chief of everything. And it was inevitable that people who did information security or IT security for a living would at some point become some kind of chief. The problem is that it's never really worked. The thing about the CISO is that it is actually slightly pointless position. Most of the stuff that they do can easily be done by the CIO, or can actually be done by lots of people who are not at board level. No one really takes the CISO seriously. This is the other thing. They pay them like six-figure salaries, and yet they don't listen to them. So the problem is also that the rest of the board doesn't consider the CISO an actual valid member of that executive team. I don't think that's actually always the fault of the board, as the CISOs will tell you. The fault is often because it's actually hard for a CISO to come up with tangible stuff to show to a board. But I think the real problem for me is why are they always talking about themselves? I don't know of any other more self-regarding body of people than the CISO community. I mean, they're always talking about their job. They're always talking about how hard it is. The only people more self-regarding than the average CISO, and let me say, not all people doing this job are like this. Usually the ones that don't talk about themselves are very good at the job. But the only type of people I've ever met who are more self-regarding than an average CISO is someone in advertising and who wants to be like them. So CISOs, if you find your job too hard, if you find that six-figure salary a bit too much, you don't have to do it, because here's the deal. What you're doing is increasingly redundant. What's happening out there is making it easier for people to make security decisions and make security purchases without some all-encompassing person who allegedly sits on the board and can make strategic decisions. Because cybersecurity isn't that strategic. It's about doing stuff to stop things happening. It isn't really that elevated, unfortunately. And I think a lot of businesses could save a lot of money if they didn't employ a CISO. I know for a fact that a major global airport fired the CISO because they realized they didn't do practical stuff. So instead, the CIO became, in effect, the CISO. In effect, became the head of security or head of IT security or whatever we want to call it. But in this world of increasing identity numbers and increasing privilege access management, cloud everywhere, all that stuff that I'm always talking about, everything everywhere, I'm starting to wonder about what CISOs actually do, apart from spend vast amounts of money and moan about their jobs. Stop moaning about your job. You've got a great job, okay? Stop going to conferences and saying how difficult it is, and stop telling other CISOs how difficult it is and telling them how to do their jobs. And stop saying how to talk to the board, okay? It's so boring. Steve Jobs, the ghost of Steve Jobs, you might say, appears in a lot of LinkedIn posts. And usually it's the same old bunch of recordings of one of his speeches, usually to his assembled employees, or that one when he's in Palo Alto or somewhere and he tells young people how amazing it is to be young, blah, 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 and so on. And there's this is all part of the cult of Steve, the Steve Jobs thing, that he was this messiah figure, that he uh, had in his hands the power to inspire people, and he changed the world. Well, he did and he didn't. The truth about Steve Jobs is that he actually wasn't a very nice person. And most of that stuff that you see at the keynote addresses, in those clips you see of him philosophizing about business and saying stuff like hire people who are smarter than you because otherwise your company will be shit. It was all a front. It was all Steve Jobs marketing Steve Jobs. And let's not forget also that Steve Jobs, for much of his career at Apple, was a failure. He was always running not a second tier, but third or fourth tier computer business that couldn't compete against Microsoft, that couldn't compete in a world that was already dominated by the IBM PC. Now, forget the fact that, as all acolytes would tell you, that the Mac may have been easier to use, was possibly a more advanced operating system, and people liked it. The fact is, it still didn't sell. And he also stole most of the ideas for the original Macintosh, as legend has it, from Xerox and so on. So that was one of his strengths, was to realize a good idea and then embed it in a product of his own and also market it very well. But there was a long line of Apple failures. Products, things like the Newton, things like the Apple Cube. It took a long time for Apple to become a success. It was in such a poor state that Microsoft actually bailed it out with investment which it holds to this day, I believe, and is probably one of the best investments they ever made. Because, as we all know, in 2007, Jobs did change the world. The iPhone, in its first iteration, changed the way we do stuff. And for that one reason, we should be thankful to Jobs, because it did completely change not just mobile phones, but it changed computing. It invented the whole world of apps. It accelerated the development of the internet. Unfortunately, it also ushered in the era of dominant social media, but that's a story for another day. So that's really where he got lucky. But I don't think, if you actually read the history of Steve Jobs and everything else he did right from the start, don't fall for all this, like he loved people and he was unbelievably charismatic and people would die for him. They bloody wouldn't. A lot of people walked out on him. Okay? So appreciate Jobs for the technology that he helped create, i.e. the iPhone and possibly the iPad. But leave it at that. Please don't keep putting those speeches that he made up on a LinkedIn, because there are better people. There are better people in the history of economics. There are better people in the history of business. There are better people in the history of manufacturing than Steve Jobs. And there are better people that actually did things that fundamentally changed the world. Henry Ford, who were also a complete arsehole, but you can't deny that Henry Ford's contribution to the history of the world is greater than Steve Jobs. And luckily, he never made any stupid empowerment speeches. Well, maybe he did, but they weren't recorded. Artificial intelligence. Well, hey, everyone's favourite topic. And you can bet your mum's maxi pad that won't disappear next year neither. In fact, you're going to hear more about it. So let's be clear. As I said at my now famous speech at the Copenhagen Cyber Evolution, there's two things we should know about AI. One is that the AI that everyone's talking about isn't AI. It's not the scary AI, the one that's going to take over the world and control us all. It is actually just very much a nice development of what we've been using for quite some time. So machine learning and algorithms that kind of understand what's going on when you're working with a computer, etc., or something else. All right. Now, what you need to learn about AI is that everybody's going to say they've got AI now. Everybody's going to be creating AI, especially as OpenAI has now made available or will be making available ways to create your own little bots and things, which is fantastic. But to use AI, you need to use data. There's no point having all these bots that are going to like revolutionize the data that you hold and revolutionize the way you understand a database or even a spreadsheet. You're not going to get anything out of those. Garbage in, garbage out very much applies. You're not going to get anything good out of those if you don't actually understand or look at the data that you're putting into it in the first place. AI can only deal with what it's fed. Okay, so if you feed it a load of garbage, it's not likely to go up with anything astounding the other side. So Henry Ford, once again, I love talking about Henry Ford. I don't know why. But he, as I have said, understood data, the importance of data implicitly. He didn't have the tools we have, but he knew how to look for data. He knew then what to say about the data or what to pull out of it and make business decisions on that. So AI is going to be everywhere. It's not going to go away. It's not going to go away ever. But don't get carried away. Okay? Understand that it is just another tool. It's ultimately a business tool, and one that is already making people's lives easier. It's not going to wipe out humanity, and it's not going to wipe out lots of jobs. It's just going to make lots of jobs easier. Might even make those CISO jobs easier. Who knows? People in my industry won't stop forgetting that everything that we talk about should be for business. It should be for a business benefit. I would like to see less philosophizing about what identity means, for example, less philosophizing about the universe of identity, the cybersecurity universe, fabrics this and fabrics that, and much more focus on what a technology can do within identity and access management and cybersecurity, what it does for the business. Because we're too focused sometimes, I think, at conferences, and we're all guilty of that. I accept that as well. It's nice to talk about things in the abstract. It's nice to talk about monsters. It's nice, like I like to do, is to drop in a movie quote or even a clip from a movie. And I like to do that because it entertains people and stops them falling asleep in my presentations. But it also means that we shouldn't get distracted by all that, because nothing that a vendor produces should be for its own sake. It should be because it makes the business safer, it protects data, etc., but it also improves the business. So we need to do and think more about business first, then identity, then everything else. So that's that one. What's my next one? AI, have we done that one? Steve Jobs, done him. CISOs, yeah, well, maybe I might have to do that one again. Yes. One thing that also won't go away is the China thing. Well, this is a bit controversial, but people won't stop reverting to a default mode that China is bad, that everything that bad that happens must be China, that China is stealing everything, and then China this and China that. Let's take, just for me personally, I used to have in this vast London penthouse that I live in, I used to have Google Mesh running the Wi-Fi because everyone said Mesh is great and Google is great. And I bought expensive pods, stuck them everywhere. The thing is, it didn't really work very well. I used to have Huawei phones before it became difficult for them to function without Google. And one thing about a Huawei phone, and I know that I'm not pronouncing that right, that's another thing that people won't get right. It still is trying to pronounce Huawei. Anyway, what I want to say is that the Huawei phone easily outperformed any other phone, particularly an iPhone, in terms of signal strength. and the radio that it had built into it, it could get a signal in places that other phones couldn't. And that's because those guys are brilliant engineers. So to get back to the Google Mesh thing, I got sick of having black spots and the thing never working, so I just bought a load of Huawei routers and stuck them around the place, and now the Wi-Fi runs brilliantly. And again, it's pretty unglamorous stuff. It's ugly white boxes, but it works. And that's one thing that this anti-Chinese thing, right, is a lot of it is based on denial. A bit like the back in the 60s and 70s when people denied that Japanese goods were actually, people were buying Japanese goods because they were actually really good. And there's this kind of double thing going on where on the one hand China is so evil and so powerful and so dangerous that it is a threat to our way of life, and that must suggest that they are technologically superior. But on the other hand, people say, "Oh, Chinese stuff is rubbish. It's just cheap knockoffs of Western technology and so on." Well, it isn't just cheap knockoffs of Western technology. Some of it is actually innovative and very good. I'll tell you what, if you're into audio, which I am, there's a lot of excellent Chinese audio gear available. Not made by the government to dominate the world. It's because people in China are excellent audiophile and excellent sound engineers and so on. So please, let's have a more rational, informed debate about China. Obviously, I'm not completely naive. No nation is innocent, and everybody is basically in the world of power games out for themselves. But not every Chinese thing is bad, okay? And I, for one, think that some of the technology they produce is superb. And that was the reason why, before it was banned, that British Telecom bought Huawei for their own networks, because they knew it was the best. So finally, what won't happen in 2024 in a non-identity related area? Manchester United won't win anything, okay? I can guarantee that. As a long-suffering supporter of Manchester United, we won't win anything. No. Never mind. Quickly, I like films, and there is a great movie on Netflix right now called Leave the World Behind, I think, something like that. Anyway, you can see in the trailer I'm playing right now. This is actually a very good, very attractive piece of cinema that deals with the impact of some kind of cyber attack on the United States. What's great about this is it isn't the usual kind of Hollywood where a cyber attack type of movie means that there's lots of people in darkened control rooms looking at screens of things happening. Instead, it takes a human angle of what is in effect the beginning of breakdown in society. But the breakdown happens quite gently, although there are odd things happening. Planes crash, oil tankers land up on the beach, navigation systems aren't working, the internet obviously is completely gone, so is all broadcasting, so people have no means of communication.
Something is happening and I don't trust them. Everything I know, I have told you. I don't believe you.
I would do anything to protect my family. What you do is your business.
And the other thing is, I mean, look at this nonsense. this guy. I mean, some of the stuff they put on is absolutely absurd. I mean, this guy's he's posted some stuff about being more of a military type of CISO, and he topped it up with, I assume, a picture of General Patton there. I mean, brilliant.